Okay, well, welcome to the session today. We're going to cover the Tool and Material Library. I also want to get into the database a little bit and give some explanation about that because I think that's one of the things that most people don't understand the most. But for those of you who have ever run a Hurco machine without the Tool Material Library, you know that once you create a program in conversational, you have no tools that you can choose from, and you have to re-enter those or bring them in from another program. With the Tool and Material Library, once you have brought in a tool and you have described it in the machine, whether it's a manual or an auto, it stays in there for use for any of your programs that you're going to use. And it's the same tool library for both NC or conversational. That was one of the other things without the Tool Material Library. If you created a tool in conversational, say tool number one was a 1/2-inch end mill, then you brought up an NC program, tool number one could be a 3-inch face mill. So with the library, they do share the same tools. So I wanted to touch a little on what the library was and what it did. Something else that we can do is we can associate speeds and feeds by materials. And we'll go over that and how to create new materials, how to enter those speeds and feeds for roughing and finishing, and then how to set a program to use a specific type of material. So first of all, I want to go over some of the settings that we have to worry about in the Tool Material Library. So if we go to the user preferences, so on the machine it'd be auxiliary, utility, user preferences. We have this button here for part and tool settings. We click on that. We've got a couple of tabs across the top of the screen, and one of them is for matching. And this is where we're going to determine how the matching happens when we bring in a new program. So if I have two Hurco mills and I've written a program that I've been running or have run in the past on Hurco 1, and I bring that into Hurco 2, without a library, it's going to match the tool numbers, the descriptions, everything exactly because they're stored with the program. If we have the library installed on the machine, then if we bring in a program that has tools 1, 2, and 3, and they don't match what tool 1, 2, and 3 in the machine are, then there are some settings that we have to think about for how will the machine or the control handle that. And this is where we set that. So there's a couple different things here. Enable automatic matching. If we turn that on, then we have these other two fields that show up. Automatically load match tool or unmatched tools as manual, yes or no, and then a maximum diameter difference, which it'll use for tolerancing to pick things that are close. So the way this works is if I bring in a program, tool number one is again a 1/2-inch end mill. It will look to see, is tool number one in the machine that I'm loading this program, in fact, an end mill, and is it a 1/2-inch diameter or within this tolerance? If it is, it will select it and use it. So it'll try to match on the tool number, description, and diameter first. If it's not the same, if tool number one is not a exact match, then it will use this second flag here for what to do with that. Do we want to automatically load an unmatched or a manual tool? It will create another tool of whatever number it chooses. It may be 1, it may not. Or do we want it to do something else? So that's how this works. If the enable matching is on, it looks at those criteria and tries to match on tool number, type, and diameter, and it uses diameter to make sure it's within whatever the difference or the tolerance is set to here. So let me open a program and show you how that works. So if I were to open a program with this set, go back to this real quick, with this set that I do want to use matching, if it's an unmatched tool, I want it to throw it in as a manual tool. We'll see how that works. I'm going to open the program. We have a couple things that popped up here. First, it says tools have automatically been added to the tool library. Those will be the manual tools that we talked about. And then if I answer OK to that, it says that the tool calibrations used were cannot be used in its current mode. That's because this is an old program from our training classes and it used a zero calibration. I'm bringing it into the machine and my current settings are for absolute tool length. That's all that's telling me. It's going to clear the tool lengths basically. But if I go look at my tool review screen now, I have tools 42, 43, and 44 they did not exist before. It automatically created those because that's what I was asking for in the program. And I didn't have anything to match in my library. Now we also see two unmatched tools. These unmatched tools are because it asked for a 3/8 end mill and I had more than one that it could choose from. It didn't know which one, there wasn't enough information for it to determine, so it's forcing me to match those. What I want to do now is go back to those settings in the part in tool settings screen and set that to set everything as unmatched. We want the matching turned off, and I'll show you how that works, and then we'll talk about how would we go about matching tools. Now, most people who have multiple machines in the library, we kind of recommend that they set it up the way I'm getting ready to describe. So if we go back to our part and tool settings, we're going to answer no to the matching. You'll notice that it turned off the other two settings. I can't even select them. So it will not try to match for me at all. So if I bring in a program, let's open another program with different tools. It's just talking to me about the rotary thing. So nothing about the tools popped up here. And if we look at our tool review screen, everything is unmatched. So it will not try to erroneously create tools. It won't try to match. And one of the problems we've found with matching is I told you it matches on tool number, description, and diameter. Well, if I'm bringing in a program where all my speeds and feeds are set up to be running steel using a 4-flute carbide end mill, but it would just decide it's going to pick tool number 50, which is a 1/2-inch end mill, but it happens to be a 2-flute high speed, that doesn't work very well. So this, when you're sharing programs between machines, I mean, you'll have your own history with this or your own experiences, but we typically have people or recommend that you set it this way. What that'll do is force the operator to then go pick the tools that match whatever it is he's trying to do. So in this example, we've got an unmatched tool. It's a 1/2-inch end mill. If we look over here at the soft keys, there's one that says match tools. When I click on that, it then opens the tool review screen and the closest matches. So I have a couple of options here. I can search through all of the end mills that I have in the machine. It won't just show the ones that are close, it'll show them all. I could highlight one, let's say this number 7, and then I could hit F4 here to choose as replacement. If I go back to my tool review, now tool 7 is the tool being used for that 1/2-inch end mill. Let's go to this drill, match tools. Let's say I need a 433 drill. There is not one in my library currently to match with. Then I can go over to the F1 button here at the top and hit Add as Manual Tool. Now if I look at my tool, I now have a tool that it picked a number for, but at least now I know that it did that. I told it to, and I can go set up a tool 45, touch it off, and so forth. So that's how the matching works. We can turn it on, which has some benefit, but can also be a little problematic. Again, my two different types of end mill example. Or we can turn it off where it puts a little bit more pressure on the operator to select things. However, it gives you more control over what it's picking. So you're literally picking these tools for it. So that's pretty much the settings that we need to talk about on the library side. One of the other things that people are not aware of mostly is the database side of this thing. Now the database gives me two options, and you can get there by hitting the auxiliary button on the control, and it'll bring up the little menu home key, and you hit this one here. It takes me to the tool material database. You may even have heard that term used along with library. This allows me to create templates for my tools that I will then create all of my tools from. We'll see some of the benefit to those here in a minute. And it also allows me to enter different types of materials that I would be using. Now, this is beneficial to everybody because I can create tools from my template, and not only will speeds and feeds be there, but things like maximum depth of cut, my plunge feeds, the peck depths, those kind of things can be stored in here as well. So I don't have to put those in every time if I create the same type of information all the time. It also is good for newer machinists. Conversational in general makes it easier for, we believe, for new machinists in this day and age of not really being able to find as many skilled machinists as we used to have, or we've got younger kids coming in. They can very easily draw geometry with a tool, if you will, with conversational. What they lack is the speeds and feeds portion of it, especially. So this would allow someone with a lot of knowledge to set up a database that then they can create or select tools from. Then the speeds and feeds would kind of be automatic. So we'll talk about the material side first, and then we'll get into the tool templates, because I think that's probably the most beneficial and probably the most underutilized part of this option. So I've gone into the database again. Again, I clicked on this little icon here. I selected the materials, and I have a handful of them put in here now. If we look over here at the F1 button, add material, I can type that in. Let's put in a 7075 aluminum. And now I have something new, 7075, in my materials tab. So I would continue doing that for all the types of materials that I like to use. And then I would create templates for the different kinds of tools that I want to create. So in this instance, I have just an end mill set up with no diameter, no length of cut. And when I create end mills, I will use this template. Let's say I want to do the same thing for a face mill. I'm going to add the tool, select what type it is. Let's do face mill. And I don't want any of the specific information for a specific tool yet because I haven't created it. I'm making a template that I will use later, and that's when I'll insert this information. But what I do want to do now is under feeds and speeds, I want to select each one of these materials, and unspecified is the only one that will be in your machine when you buy the option. So let's say 7075 aluminum. Now I have a tab for roughing and for finishing that I can set speeds and feeds for, and chip loads, or and so forth. So I can set this information up both in surface speed for roughing and finishing. You'll see also things in the roughing like peck depth are here, plunge depth, a lot of the things that we use the same thing over and over again. So this will also help eliminate needing to put this in all the time. One of the other things I like is I can also set coolant condition for roughing and finishing if they happen to be different tools. So that's how I would associate speeds and feeds for every one of these materials. And yes, it's going to be time consuming, but I only have to do it once. So I can put this information in here for aluminum and brass and so forth. Now, that is stored with that template, and I don't have to enter it again. So let's say that I was going to create a new tool. Typically, what we would do is we would go to the tool setup screen, we would type in a tool number, find one that's not in there, and we would go ahead and set that up. Let's say we did a face mill or whatever. Here on the advanced tool settings, I have all of those same speeds and feeds available to me. I could do that here as well, using the speeds and feeds for roughing, finishing, and different materials. But if I create another face mill, none of that information exists. I have to do it again for the next tool. What creating the tool from the template will do is it will bring all that in for me. So and the way we do that on the machine or on the desktop is we do that under this little manual tab here. I click on manual. It's the same screen that I would see on the machine. And we have the tool management button. We'll click on that. And there's no way for me to, from scratch, enter anything into the spindle or into an auto tool until it's been a manual tool first. So the only place we can do this is under the manual tab. Then we can create from that an auto tool or whatever, just like we normally would. So you're going to go to tool management under the manual screen, go to the manual tab, and then you have insert tool. If I click on that, it brings up all of my templates. And let's say that I wanted to do a face mill from my template. So I highlight it, create tool using template. It picked a tool number, which, as you know, I can change later on if I want to, but it created a tool from the template. Now if I go in here to tool 46, which it stayed on, by the way, my speeds and feeds, I believe I put a number in there for that, 470, 75. Yeah, the 800 surface feet. So all of my database or all the information that I put in there would have come over with the tool. And that would help keep things, speeds and feeds, depth of cut, and all of that. Again, for a less experienced operator, they can use this procedure to create tools that has all the information with them. And the last piece of that little puzzle is now we have to somehow tell the machine what, or the program, what material it is using. So if I go to my program manager on this particular program, just highlight whichever one you want, hit program properties, and you can see that currently we have material set as unspecified. That's the default. Again, that's the only material that shows up in your database unless you add them, and that's what the default is. But you see over here we have change material type. When I click on that, now I can select any material that I choose. I'll select that material for the program. Do you want to update the tool, define feeds and speeds in the data blocks to correspond with this new material? Yes. All the data blocks using this are getting ready to get updated. Should we also replace manually entered feeds and speeds? If you've entered them manually, then you probably want to say no. If you're just using what is in there, we would say yes. And then when we exit this and go back into the program, you see that we are now using aluminum, 7075 aluminum. And any tools that are in there would be using, that we've created from that, would be using our speeds and feeds. So if we match this with our tool 83 that we just created, we didn't give it a diameter and so forth. That's the other thing. When I created that tool, sorry, I skipped over that. This, once the tool has been created from the database, now we start to give it its independent information. Now the 3-inch diameter, it knows that it can calculate an RPM for us now. It can calculate or use the surface footage, chip load, number of teeth, all of that. Once we've created the actual tool template or tool from the template, we can start putting in the information for this specific tool. So now if I were to go over and pick this unmatched face mill, match it, tool 46, choose as replacement, that becomes the tool, and we know that the speeds and feeds for that are set based on what was in our speeds and feeds here. So this is going to take a lot of time up front, but it is beneficial in a lot of shops. Some shops, the library, the fact that those tools stay there, they're always touched off, we can share between NC and conversational, that's good enough for them in a lot of cases. Other shops could really benefit from this, again, because of maybe the lack of knowledge from the machinists on the floor versus some of the guys that have been there for a while, they know the tooling they have and so forth. One last little thing here too, if I have several different Hurco machines, what I can do, whether it's on my desktop software like this or on the machine itself, when I go to the input screen, we can now export the tool library. So we can import and export the tool library, export all the tools, manual tools, whatever. I can put these out onto a thumb drive, take them over to another machine, and then import them in, merge tools into library, and then create that same duplicate database between the machines. And I could do that, if I updated one, I could then go through and update the others. So it's a very underutilized option, I think, that has a little more power than what it gets credit for. But for most shops, again, just being able to use those tools at any time and for any, either purpose is usually what they are looking for. So it's usually good enough. But I wanted to get in and show a little bit about the database side of things. And that way, if you weren't aware of it, you are now. And you could go to giving that a try on your machine.